Hello and welcome to Firearm Freedom. This is going to be another First Impressions video. In today's First Impressions video, we are taking a look at the Mantis Blackbeard dry fire training system. There are some links down in the description where you can support what I do here on the channel. Have you picked up some awesome Firearm Freedom merch in the way of t-shirts, hoodies, all that good stuff? That link is the first link down in the description, and this is not a sponsored video, so if you're looking for a way to support what I do here, you can purchase some merch, rep the brand. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to make sure you're not being censored out of existence here on YouTube, make sure to comment down below, hit the subscribe button. All that interaction should help and make sure these videos continuously show up in your feed. The Mantis Blackbeard. This is a pretty cool training setup. It's one that I actually have had a lot of trigger time, if you will, on long before I got my version. What is my relationship with Mantis? Mantis sent me this product for free to check out. They wanted to know my honest opinion of it. They are not a sponsor of the channel or anything like that, and I greatly appreciate the support of them sending out the product. And aside from them sending me this, I've actually had a lot of time on the Mantis Blackbeard at the gun shop that I work at. We're hooked up as a dealer and we get in a wide variety of their dry fire products, and we have a Blackbeard that we keep to show customers. And let's be honest, if there's a little bit of a slow day at the gun shop, you can generally see me as well as everyone else that works at the shop dry firing the system on whatever gun it's in that day and just kind of getting a feel for it. I cannot even begin to count the thousands upon thousands of trigger pulls that Blackbeard has had in that gun shop. I know I myself have probably messed around with that at least a couple thousand times since it's been in the shop as a demo. We actually broke the first one after God only knows how many rounds. And I also should mention that even though it's not necessarily rated for this on their website, we actually ran this setup on a shop full auto post-sample machine gun lower, and we were running it full auto probably much more than it should ever be run full auto, if you will. And that's what ultimately ended up damaging it down the road. We wanted to just see really how much these things can freaking take. And let me tell you, that was after probably about what would be 10,000 rounds full auto, and then it finally was just not really communicating well anymore with the battery pack. They sent us a new one, and it was cranking along no problem at all. What exactly is the Blackbeard? It is a dry fire training system that's designed for AR-15 variants, and it is going to allow you a way to actually pull the trigger multiple times during dry fire without having to cycle the action. And on top of that, you get a laser that's going to give you somewhat of an indicator on where those would-be rounds would be landing downrange. It's pretty crafty the way that they do this. You have your laser module here, which you can see looks a lot like a standard charging handle and bolt carrier group of an AR-15, and that is going to be where your laser comes out of. And then the magazine, what goes in the magazine slot and locks into place, is actually the battery pack. So the battery pack here, you got your two connections there. And if you lock them up into place, you are going to get a little indication that it is good to go and in action. You also have a small switch right here, and that switch is what controls either momentary, which is every time you pull the trigger, the laser is going to come out, or you can flick it down like that, and it is going to be constant on. So when you connect the battery at this point, the laser, if you guys can see it there, is just constantly on all the time. The benefit of constantly on is going to be if you're working on different drills with a team, room clearing, all of those things where you need to really be sure to train somebody about muzzle discipline. This does a really great job of indicating that muzzle discipline by there being a constant laser sticking out the end of the gun. You also have the ability to actually adjust the laser so that way it properly lines up with your optic. That's a huge deal because it allows you to practice things like height over bore. It allows you to get a rough idea of where those rounds would be landing. Of course, it is not designed to be a sight-in device because it's not actually going into the chamber itself. It's just simply lining itself up on the barrel. So your optic needs to be sighted in ahead of time. Of course, if your optic is not fully sighted in, then that's not going to be that accurate. They also have the Mantis Blackbeard in a few different flavors of laser. You have the red laser, the green laser, which this one is the green laser, and then you also have an infrared only laser. So if you want to mess with this thing with some night vision devices, you could absolutely use the IR laser, and it's going to work great for that as well. One of the things I love about the Mantis Blackbeard is how easy it is to set up. I don't need to switch anything out or do anything weird. All you need to do is take out the bolt carrier group and charging handle of your standard rifle. And the nice thing is that your Blackbeard system just slides right into place. Upper gets closed on the lower, and once you close that into place, now you have the ability to put your battery pack in, and once you put your battery pack in, it's going to give you that indication that it makes contact. And as you guys will see here, you can flick it on fire, and when we pull the trigger, not only is the trigger resetting, but it's also giving us a laser each and every time. Once again, to show you the constant on in action, if we flick that down into the on position, the laser is just constantly on. We don't need to pull the trigger. However, if you want to, the trigger still pulls. How this is actually working, it's a little arm on the inside here that's just simply resetting your hammer each time. So when you are looking at this, every time you pull that trigger, the fire control group is acting the exact same as if a bolt is riding across the top. Now, you guys heard me mention in the beginning there that we use this on a shop full auto lower, meaning we were able to put it into the third position. So apparently this works full auto. I don't know that, again, they advertise that on their website. Now, they do specifically say on there that it does not work with Fostech binary triggers. I don't know if it works with any binary triggers because of the way that this is designed. I don't know that it would properly trip a binary trigger in the way that it's designed to work properly. So I don't know that this would ever work with a binary trigger. And I also found that doing drills, manipulating the selector into the full auto position, it's really helpful with this laser setup because you can really get the idea of transitioning from semi into full and getting a laser to just kind of remind you of what's going on. Now, for whatever reason, these also will not work with Springfield Saint rifles. I don't know exactly why, but they will also not work with sear-blocked lowers, so some of the older Colt lowers and other things. Again, I don't know exactly why they won't work with those. It's probably just because of the way that everything lines up here. Getting into the overall fitment of the Blackbeard, I have tried this thing at the shop that I work at and here at the house with a bunch of different rifles that I have in the collection in the way of the AR-15 variants, and all of them have fit pretty good. What I have noticed with some rifles, for whatever reason, because it happens with lower quality stuff and high dollar stuff where I know the upper is in spec to the lower, it sometimes is very, very hard to close. Now, that's not necessarily the fault of the Mantis per se, but you might want to play around with it in a few different rifles in the collection. Take, for example, this 10.5 build project that I got going down. It's a build in progress, a lot of stuff going on with this right now. But if we put this in, first of all, it's a little bit tight in the upper, and I know a lot of my other rifles, it just drops right in, no problem. On top of that, if you press down, you'll notice that it's real tight to try to get it on close there, and you really have to squeeze down and then finally get it into place. And then, of course, everything works just fine. I have seen on other guns where it just does not want to close, and it just truly seems like something's out of spec in the upper. It must just be how the fitment is with the Blackbeard and that particular upper. If you play around with it a little bit, it most definitely does not do that with every gun. In fact, most of the rifles that you put this into, it drops right into, and I have not seen that issue across the board. You're just going to want to be aware of that, and remember, this is plastic, so don't go forcing it. I have seen that happen as well, where it just does not want to fit and somebody's forcing it down and all of a sudden a part breaks or something like that because it's just really not working out well. So just try it in your upper and lower set and see how it fits before you just start sending it. When it comes to the trigger pull, they advertise the Blackbeard on their website as having the exact same trigger pull as far as poundage and reset that your trigger would have live fire at the range. And it depends, in my experience, on the trigger. In this case, we have just a standard BCM polished mil-spec trigger, so it's nothing really to write home about. And the pull is perfectly accurate poundage-wise to what you would feel at the range. But I will say, with some of these mil-spec triggers in some of the setups, to actually outrun the trigger. It really just depends on the gun. But in this case, I mean, if you try, you can see there, I mean, you can kind of get to a point where you outrun that trigger. And I've noticed it, and I know that that would not be happening live fire with just how much I've shot this gun and other things, and it sometimes happens. Now, I have run this setup on like a Geisley trigger or a CMC. And side note, this is a great way to test a trigger and just see how you're liking it, because you can put it in the gun and you can rip it up on that Mantis system and it feels exactly the same. And you don't outrun the trigger. I'm sure I'll be showing you guys some back roll of this in a Geisley Super Dynamic Enhanced trigger setup, and this thing rips without issue. It's capable of doing at least 10 trigger pulls per second. So you can really rip it out with this thing, no problem. But again, on certain mil-spec triggers like this one here, you can kind of sometimes outrun it. So just keep that in mind. When it comes to how this actually works for dry fire practice, I think it is phenomenal. It is a lot of fun. Not only is it fun, it also renders your gun completely safe. You are removing the bolt carrier group, you're removing the charging handle, you're removing any possible way, including the magazine, of there being ammunition ready to fire in this gun. If you are doing certain force-on-force training, you could utilize safely a setup like this after everything has been properly checked. Now, of course, it's not necessarily force-on-force because it is a laser, but you can get the idea, especially in a classroom setting. It's a huge benefit. If you're moving around the house, doing some dry fire, LARPing around, whatever, trying to work on clearing doorways, all those things, you can utilize this setup, which you know is safe. It is essentially turned into a blue gun in a way with this red sticking out of it, and you know, okay, that is good to go for dry fire practice. Of course, it is rather limited in the amount of drills you can do because you can't do reloads and not everything is going to be exactly the same. There's no recoil and all those things. But you can most definitely get a feel for the rifle. You can get a feel for all the accessories that you just put on it, or just get reps on that trigger at the house without issue. And you can most definitely do some height over bore drills. You can do some other things with dry fire that you could not do, at least easily, just racking the charging handle. And sometimes, especially for height over bore, you just couldn't do in the way of being 100% sure the round is landing where you mean it to each and every time. You can also use this in conjunction with Mantis's Laser Academy, which we'll talk about in another video, and that is a whole other ball game of training. And one of the final notes I'll touch on training with this is it most definitely makes you want to pick up the gun that it's in more. I don't know what it is about it. It's like a freaking adult version of a clicky pen that you want to just keep using. It's so annoying for others around you to be right next to you, but it's a constant thing at the gun shop and also now at my house. I know Mrs. Freedom is not going to be having a good time with the constant clicking, but there's just something about it. You just want to pick the gun up, you want to pull the trigger, and I think that's a huge deal when it comes to dry fire. That is going to wrap up this first impressions video on this cool little dry fire training system. If you guys have any other questions about this Mantis Blackbeard or anything else on the channel, please throw them down below in the comment section, and you guys know I absolutely will get back to you. While you're down there, head up to the description, check out all those links, and stay tuned for more great videos coming soon.